back to Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. The time is 7:20 on Sunday, November the 20th. Thank you very much indeed for all your messages. Lots of them coming. Good morning, says Natasha Sinclair. Good morning, Natasha. Best show on TV all weekend. I really look forward to it. Dr. David looking rather dashing. What a gorgeous waistcoat. A majestic look going on with Dr. Rene. Very chic, very French.
Rene.
Rene, yes, Yes, I can't carry on with that because that will all go horribly wrong. So this one's from Dead as a Dodo says there won't be a vote on vaccine passports. Rishi Sunak has already signed up to it by treaty. Louise says, wow, loving the waistcoats. But now to a serious note, the government are absolute, and I can't read the next word. What part of Brexit do they not understand? Hunt and his green style China. No more. This one's from Bill, says, good morning, David. The Tories recently signed us up to PESCO, a main pillar of the EU Defence Force. I'm awaiting confirmation from Ben Wallace, who I contacted upon hearing this news, which was bitterly resisted during the Brexit talks. I mean, this is the point, actually, that makes me so angry. We fought legitimately. We had a democratic vote. We voted to leave. We still haven't left, and now they're dragging us back in.
Quietly, some of it quietly, because that is true about that Defence Force. I think they have signed into that. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. But they know that there's so much else going on, David, that this stuff is easy to hide.
Of course, absolutely right. And Jackie, one more from Jackie. Good morning, Jackie. I'm apoplectic at what's happening in this country. Vaccine passports equals mandatory jab, not happening. Brexit under threat, not happening. We have a hostile government that's vandalising this country, and the people need to raise their voices and just say no. Thank you very much indeed for all of those. Please keep those coming in. Well, it's time now to go through this morning's papers. Joining us this morning is Charlie Rowley, who is a former Cabinet Office Special Advisor. Good morning to you.
Morning. Thank you.
Oh, no, pleasure. Lovely to see you. You can see how angry people are. And the fact is the government are obviously up to tricks and thinking we won't notice. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, there's obviously a bit of a recognition that maybe because of the economic impacts that have taken place over the last few years, particularly with the investment that's had to be invested because of COVID, that you need to make up as much as you possibly can. And so having closer ties with the EU, possibly through this Swiss-style arrangement, is something that's being considered. I don't think it will be something that we see or that sees the light of day. Not immediately. I think there will be closer ties. I think, look, not just on the economy, but if you just take another issue that I know is very important to listeners here, the migrant crisis. It is no coincidence that having left the EU, that we're seeing 40,000 people illegally make that crossing across the channel because there is a lack of cooperation between the UK and the French authorities. So I think closer ties are always better, yes, where you can have them whilst retaining independence and your own
and sovereignty.
And sovereignty, exactly.
Yes,
If one was cynical, one could say that it was in the EU's interest to send 40,000 migrants over the channel
cynic.
I know, to make people angry. Yeah. And then for the government to deliver a solution which is closer ties.
I mean, you make a great point, and actually on Twitter I've been absolutely inundated by people saying, well, Brexit was a complete mess, we need to rejoin. And you're right. So that's all feeds back into that, actually. There's a lot of games going on, I think.
Potentially, but
you're very good.
I mean, obviously, when it comes to the migrant crisis, it's the criminal gangs that you need to target, and we need to close those down and lock up those criminals. But look, I think whatever happens, we need to ensure that we have a strong and successful economy, and that we deal with the migrant crisis.
You should be a politician. You're very good. You're very good. Should we start with your first paper, which I thought was a very interesting story?
Well, it's the front page of the Telegraph, which we're going with is Zahawi. Or do you want to jump to? Sorry,
Zahawi.
So Nadine Zahawi has given his first interview as the Tory Party chairman to the Telegraph, where he declares that we want to cut taxes before the next election. Now, of course,
could have fooled us.
Well, the public would be fully aware that we've had to raise taxes and take difficult decisions. That was the statement, the autumn statement that Jeremy Hunt put forward only on Thursday. And I think the idea here is obviously to have a dual process whereby you're straight with the public about the difficult decisions that you need to make. We need to raise taxes in order to fund the 50 billion black hole that was left behind because of the spending that's taking place
by this government.
By this government, but necessary to protect people's lives and livelihoods.
Possibly.
Because
unnecessary lockdowns, but that's just my feeling.
people will have that,
Of course.
and I absolutely understand and recognise that. But the reality is that money has been spent.
Yes.
It needs to be repaid. But obviously, what this is an attempt to do, and it's particularly telling that it's been given to the Telegraph as the first interview, is to try and win back supporters and voters of the Conservative Party that may feel as though that they're not prepared to come out and knock on doors and deliver those leaflets. But I think it is absolutely, this isn't cynical. This is, I think, absolutely the right approach, because if you take the difficult decisions that obviously Jeremy Hunt has taken, if you do see inflation come down, if you do start to see those green shoots of the economy start to grow again, then there is an absolute chance that you can cut tax again and go on to win the next election. And this is exactly what happened in 2010 when the Lib Dem Tory coalition had to deal with the economic crash of 2008. It was then rewarded in 2015 with a majority because it was straight to the public about the difficult decisions, and it got spending under control. We saw growth, and it went on to win that election.
I mean, you make some great points. Yesterday we heard from Conservative Party members who said, I'm literally not banging on doors because of the reception they're now receiving on the door. I think mostly the door is being slammed in their face. And call me a cynic, but obviously we are seeing these massive tax rises, the highest tax burden since the Second World War. People are really struggling. At the same time, the spending cuts aren't coming in till after the election. That is deeply political.
Well, I think, again, you're right. It is the highest tax burden since the Second World War, but we haven't seen a crisis like COVID other than since the Second World War. So, you need to match that response with
We haven't, but we haven't seen a response like the COVID response. And all of the data now suggests that actually that response was not necessary. Locking down actually did more harm than good, and it does. That's what the most recent data suggests. Lots of us were saying it from the very start. None of us had a say on whether or not 400 billion got spent. 37 billion of it, let's not forget, wasted on track and trace. So I think, there needs to be a big
That's a brilliant point. Track and trace alone would have solved that.
37 billion.
Almost.
And look, there's an inquiry coming up which will look into all of these
Are you confident
issues.
that we'll actually find out something useful from that?
No, I am actually. No, I am, because I think the government itself has got to be honest, and mistakes were made, and I think that's not just in this country but around the world. Yes. Nobody knew how to deal with this pandemic,
no.
So you can't fault anybody for trying. And
well, we did have a pandemic plan. We threw it out of the window.
Well, there was a plan, my understanding, to deal with a particular kind of influenza, but COVID itself, which was a new virus, which was something that was spread right across Europe and beyond, right across the world, was not something that we dealt with before. But when it comes to spending, I mean, I totally understand the numbers and the figures that people will be agitated by. The one spending that I won't apologise for, and I don't think anyone should apologise for, is the amount that was spent on PPE, whether it's been used or whether it hasn't been.
The procurement was pretty awful.
Well, I think if you're in politics and you're dealing with a pandemic that you've not seen for since over 100 years, if people are coming forward in good faith, what you hope is in good faith, to say, I can help, well, and there was a process which should have rooted out those people. Now, if it hasn't, that needs to be looked at, and that needs to be corrected. But I would rather have more PPE to protect the people that are protecting us.
Or maybe a long-term plan where we had enough stocks of PPE that we weren't forced to go out to the market and give people who made cat food £200 million contracts for PPE.
You make a good point. Interestingly, Patrick Minford, who was an advisor to Thatcher, says the tax rate is a wrecking ball that will plunge Britain into prolonged slump.
Well, I don't agree, because, as I say, we've had to take, as a Conservative government, or the Conservative government has had to take, which I'm no longer a part, as a former advisor, it's had to take difficult decisions before, and it did so in 2010 when it first came into office. It took even tougher decisions then in terms of spending, and it was able to, as I say, be rewarded in 2015 with a victory because it was straight with the public. The public understood the decisions that needed to be taken, and it got on with it, and as I say, went on to manage it.
So it's really interesting, actually, when you look at the latest polls. This is Ipsos this morning, showing that actually, so Labour's at 47%, Tories at 21%. But what I think is quite interesting about this is that 36% back Sunak, 28% back Starmer, which is what you wouldn't expect to see that.
And that's a very good point. And that is the poll when people are asked, who do you think will be the best Prime Minister, or who would be the best Prime Minister? And it's telling that as a man who was the former Chancellor of this country, who's managed the nation's finances, who's now leading the country, who's been on the international stage in the last week, dealing with the G20. He's visited Ukraine last night, visited President Zelensky. He is leading this country, and people are clearly more favourable to him being the Prime Minister than Sir Keir Starmer. Which means, a very quick point, which means that just, people don't know what Labour stand for. It's all very well to be a critic and a spectator and a commentator on the sidelines. The government has got a lot of issues that it's had to deal with, and that's why I think people, when it comes to an election, they'll look at what Labour are offering versus what the Conservatives have been able to provide, and I think that choice will be pretty clear.
Do you honestly think the Conservatives can win?
Yes.
Do you seriously?
I absolutely do, yes.
I think there's more chance of me being the next monarch.
I was going to say, or prescribing medication. But that's really interesting. I mean, just in terms of, and I have to be slightly careful what I say, just in terms of the numbers hemorrhaging away from the Conservative Party and joining other smaller parties, and I know this because I've seen the numbers, it's very significant.
It is. Look, it has been don't get me wrong, a terrible, terrible, tumultuous time to be a Tory. And there's no getting away from that. But the reality is, I think 2 years is a long time until the next general election. That poll isn't insignificant, as we just talked about, with Rishi being ahead of Sir Keir Starmer. So when it comes down to a clear choice between who do you want to be the Prime Minister of this country, someone that has been in office for a long time, someone that's got to grips with the nation's finances, someone that's taken the difficult decisions, that's dealing with the migrant crisis, that's dealing with the economy, that's dealing with energy crises, that's dealing with international affairs, it is Rishi Sunak versus Sir Keir Starmer, and I know what choice I'll be making.
Right, and should HS2 have gone ahead?
Well, HS2 is a infrastructure project which will bring growth to the economy. That's one of the investments that was actually outlined in the budget under Jeremy Hunt, including investing in the NHS and education to ensure that there is that continued growth, as well as...
So should it have gone ahead, or should we have scrapped it?
Well, I think it is, whatever the merits or not people think about HS2, I think it's too far gone down the line, to put it like that, that it should be. I think it would be more costly to scrap it than to continue with it.
Well, it wouldn't.
And I think it would bridge. It brings benefits, obviously. Otherwise, I don't think it would be going ahead at all.
But it wouldn't be more costly to scrap it. I mean, 11 billion has been spent. There'll be
another 88 billion. Yeah.
Well, there are always figures that are banded around, but I think, look, connecting the Midlands and London, as well as investing in Northern Rail, that's another commitment that was made. I think will be is the right thing to do.
Yes.
So connecting the UK or increasing better connectivity across the UK, particularly within England, is not a bad thing.
Okay, let's move on. We'll take you off the hotspot for the moment. Right, so your next paper, I can't even read what you've written.
It's Infantino.
Infantino, yes. So let's talk about this, because this is really quite an extraordinary outburst by the president of FIFA, isn't it?
It is, and it's the most extraordinary press conference. I mean, we criticised Liz Truss for not giving long enough press conferences. I think less than 10 minutes. He went on for 56, 57 minutes yesterday.
Wow.
It was cringeworthy.
That's really some accolade to do that.
He did, and he went on, I mean, he not just to defend the decision, obviously you'd expect as the president of FIFA to defend why it's going to Qatar, but he went on to say today he felt Qatari, I felt Arab, I felt African, I feel gay, I feel disabled, I feel a migrant worker. I think he feels pretty embarrassed now, actually, after that speech, because it was something that didn't resonate with anybody, didn't chime with, it was totally out of kilter with the politics of the World Cup being awarded to Qatar, the issues that are being raised when it comes to equality for women, when it comes to equality for LGBT fans that want to go and support. It's illegal to be gay in Qatar.
Indeed.
And for migrant workers that have lost their...
Not quite, but almost.
So we've got a clip, actually, of exactly what he said. Let's just see if we can play that.
Today, I have very strong feelings. I can tell you that. Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker.
I mean, it's really the most extraordinary sentence.
It really
isn't it? What do you make of that?
I was astonished. I must confess, I didn't wait up for the full 57 minutes. But,
I don't blame you, to be honest.
Life's too short.
Yes.
I was astounded because, as I say, it is. Football is political. Going back to, even beyond, the First World War, when there was sort of the armistice and ceasefires, and exactly, football is political. And I think it should be encouraged. That look, I'm not going to sit here and point the finger at Qatar or point the finger at people to say you should be doing X, Y, Z. I don't think that's the right approach. The way you bring people with you, or to make changes by bringing people with you, I should say. And so subtle messages. So Harry Kane wearing a rainbow armband as the captain of the national team, I think, would send a subtle but significant message. I think other teams should join in with sending that message, whether they stand up for equality, for liberty, for equal rights, which will just allow people of Qatar and the rest of the world to perhaps open their eyes and think that maybe they could be as beautiful as Qatar is, and the scenery, it could be an even more beautiful country by having the same liberties and rights that we may have in the West.
It's interesting, there are official armbands they're giving out with the hashtag Save the Planet, no discrimination, and bring the moves. But obviously the England team have decided that they're going to wear their own. So it'll be interesting. He also went on, didn't he, to defend the Qatari royal family for banning beer. And again, that to me is extraordinary, because as a fan, if you've gone and you're told that, you're paying for a ticket and you expect certain things to be there, that's a breach of a contract, isn't it?
Totally. And it's a wider problem that at the very last minute, something that was agreed, as you say, for Budweiser, the sponsor, to be able to sell beer within the stadiums, to just pull that rug under the carpet a day before the tournament kicks off.
I think that's the key.
It's beggars belief.
Yes, I think that's the key. The key that it was agreed and then it was pulled. Because as I said yesterday, I don't think we have any right to tell Qatar how to run their country. We can say how we think it should be in, this is our freedom, these are our liberties, we have a good society. But to say to Qatar, you're wrong, you must do what we want when we visit you, is entirely wrong. We can't expect that. But I think this speech was just embarrassing because he didn't look passionate. He didn't look like he felt like all of those people that he identified. He looked bored. He looked like he was going through the motions, and it went on forever, almost as if he didn't really know how to bring it to an end, because he didn't believe in the substance.
He was trying to make up for his £3 million salary, I assume.
Wow.
Well, yeah. Let's move on then to this really, really terrible story, your next story.
Yes.
Exactly. And this is, you're right, this is an awful, heartbreaking story of a 2-year-old boy called Awab Ishaq, who in Rochdale, a family who were social housing tenants as part of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing Association, who had raised complaints with the local authority for years that their poor child, 2 years old, had a respiratory condition, which was developed what they thought was on the back of mould that was in their house. Now, they raised this time and time again, and the Housing Association did absolutely nothing about it. They turned a blind eye, and it resulted in a death of a 2-year-old in December 2020, which should never happen in this country. And it's prompted Michael Gove, my former boss, to write to every local authority and every social housing provider to say that you are effectively on notice.
Good.
You need to up your standards. You need to make sure that any complaints have been made need to be looked into, and anything that has been found to be below the standard will be looked into thoroughly, and your job is clearly at risk. Now, Gareth Swarbrick, who was the chief executive of Rochdale Borough-wide Housing Association, was trying to cling on to his job. He is on an £187,000 salary and could not see that he was at fault, or that his business or his organisation was at fault for these terrible, terrible errors. I'm delighted to say he has now seen the light, and he has resigned.
Did he see the light, or was there someone showed him the light?
I'm pretty sure somebody showed him the light. But it is, as I say, it is beggars belief that somebody on that salary that can turn such a blind eye or be totally incompetent or inept to see that you are at fault and want to carry on as if nothing has happened.
I think there are some important issues from that, and I think the reason that he was able to turn a blind eye, because let me tell you, this story is not one story.
I was about to say exactly that. It happened years ago when I was going
so
into
I
houses.
see this. I have patients coming to me all the time asking for letters to help them with their housing associations, with their local council, because they too have mould all over the walls and water running down it. This this goes across the country. And there are many, many boroughs in this country that have never once used the law available to them to prosecute landlords, whether they're housing associations or individual ones, for supplying substandard housing. This is endemic across the country, and landlords know, including this man on 187,000, that it doesn't matter, they don't have to do it. So perhaps now, with the letter from Gove, they will start thinking about it.
And rightly so.
Absolutely.
And it's not before time, actually, and I welcome that, actually. Will Gove sort this?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he will. I'm convinced he will, actually. Because it's a story that is just, it's heartbreaking. It's pulled at the nation's heartstrings. It was the same with the cladding scandal and Grenfell, the Grenfell tragedy, which had been going for years now. But Michael, I think, one of the great things that, I saw him in office and working hard at was to make sure that where there is cladding, where there is unsafe cladding on these buildings, that you hold the people who are responsible to account. You say to the housing industry, you are responsible, you are going to do it, you are going to figure it out. It is not the taxpayer that is going to pick up the bills for whatever cladding that is unsafe. You as an industry are going to sort it. And in a similar vein, it'll be the housing associations and local authorities who, if they are not sorting this out, they will be held to account. And I'm pretty sure that he will show that same determination in this case.
But it will come down to, of course, not enough housing, for not enough people, and not enough resources within those local authorities to fix it.
Yeah. Let's move on. So we've got time, I think, for one more. Which would you like? Bojo or Adele?
I think Adele.
Let's go on then. I like this one.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
So after 10 months ago in January, she reluctantly disappointed fans by pulling out of the Las Vegas.
Well, so she's in Vegas, right?
She's in Vegas. Yeah. She's in Vegas. She's at Caesar's Palace.
That's a big venue.
And it was I think again at the very last minute she put on an Instagram that she couldn't perform, the show couldn't go on, it wasn't ready. She'd suffered from I think COVID and some of the staff and the set just hadn't been prepared, and she just wasn't in the best place. But 10 months on, the set has come alive. She's performed a 2-hour set, 20 songs, brought the house down. The crowd so loud that the sky could fall.
Very good, very good. And apparently in this, she spoke for a great deal of it, apparently, in expletives. And there's a great editorial this morning saying that you can take the girl out of London, but you can't take London
Not
out of
Adele, and I like that, actually.
Yeah, I
really
do too.
like that.
I do. But that's an amazing venue. And how long is she, so it's a residency, is it, I assume, that she'll be there for a long time?
10 months, something like that.
Wow, she'll be paid a couple of quid.
Two shows a weekend. Apparently, she's only staying one night in Vegas in her £30,000 Caesar's Palace suite.
Why?
Which is part of the contract, because she's going to fly in, do one, stay a night, do the next, go home.
So she's just doing weekends?
Just weekends, 2 shows. And she's getting, I think, $1 million each weekend. It might be per show, actually, so it might be $2 million.
That's a long
weekend.
flight, is all I'm thinking, to go back in. That's a long commute every week.
£2 million quid, would you do it?
Yes, absolutely. No problem with that at all. But also, I was reading, I don't know whether the show has been pared down. I know the original show was meant to have huge 50-piece orchestra and various other things and rivers, and she was meant to apparently descend from the sky singing Skyfall. I don't know whether, I think all of that got pared down, but by all accounts it went very well.
Because it is Vegas, isn't it? Apparently it's a very intimate 4,000 strong audience.
That's intimate for Vegas. Amazing. Thank you so much, Charlie. Very, very good to see you.
Pleasure.
And I hope we didn't put you on the spot too much.
Not at all. Happy to. What more could you possibly want from a Sunday morning?
Well, exactly. So we like to be serious and have a bit of fun as well. So thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Charlie Rowley, who is a former Cabinet Office Special Advisor. After the break, we'll be taking your calls, your thoughts, your messages. Keep them coming in, please. This is TalkTV, broadcasting live from the Talk Radio